All right, good evening, everybody. It's good to be here, and hoping that it's going to be a very profitable few days that we spend together. We're looking at God and evil today and tomorrow, so we want to start out talking about God. Who is God, and how do we conceive of God as Christians, especially when we are engaging with unbelievers and skeptics, people who doubt that God exists. And you can tell, if you've been quite observant, that our context and our culture is requiring more and more of these kinds of conversations nowadays. Maybe a few years ago, it was easy to just tell someone that God loves you. But right now, a lot of Nigerians, Africans are becoming quite skeptical about the idea of God and his existence. And part of the reasons is because of this whole problem of evil. So when we say that God exists, how can we make a case for the existence of God and not sound like we are just appealing to dogma, something that we already just agree on without any evidence? So sometimes what we try to do is we try to talk about the arguments for God's existence. Do we have reasons, well thought out reasons that we can hold on to believe that God even exists in the first place? 1 Peter 3:15 says that you should be ready to give a defense to anyone who asks you a reason for the hope that is in you. So the idea is that we believe that God exists, and properly speaking, we should have reasons why we believe that God exists. And some of those reasons are personal and private, but if you're going to be witnessing to someone, you have to give them a reason that they can hold on to. It cannot just be about what you know at some point. It has to be about what you can show, what you can let them in on. And so we're going to be looking at least just one of the lines of evidence that you can give for the existence of God. It would help you to solidify what you already believe, and it would equip you to be able to make a case in the public space for God's existence. So sometimes people try to give a definition for who God is, and that's a difficult task, but some people would say that God is a transcendent being who is maximally perfect. God is a maximally perfect, transcendent being. God is that which no greater than him can be conceived. So it's just the way that you try to understand the fact that you cannot conceive of a being that is greater than God. If you could get an idea of a being that is greater than God, then that greater being would be God. You get the point? So he's that which no greater than can be conceived. He is maximally perfect. It means in all his attributes, he is maximal. He is maximally just. He is maximally kind. He is maximally loving. He is maximally powerful in that kind of sense. And so that's one way that you can conceive of who God is. And we now move further to say, do we have reasons to believe that such a being exists? A personal being who is maximally loving, maximally kind, maximally just, maximally powerful, all of that. Do we have reasons to believe that God exists? And because of the context of the discussion this period, we'll be talking about the moral argument for the existence of God. So there are a number of arguments for God's existence, and one of them would be the moral argument. We want to make a case from morality itself and draw a line back to the fact that God exists. So there's a technical way, there's a syllogism that you can use, or like an argument that you can use to present the case. What an argument is basically is you're basically making a point and you are backing up that point with reasons. That's what you're doing. So if I said, for example, that God exists, that's a claim that I'm making. It's an assertion. I'm just making that claim. But if I said, I believe that God exists because of the following reasons, and I give you 2-3 reasons, then I am making an argument. Do you get the point? Do you get the point? So, for instance, if I said, it's not a very good example, but if I said that Tinubu was the best president we've ever had, I know that the quietness from this is very telling. So if I said Tinubu was the best president that Nigeria has ever had, some of you can even beat me, right? Because I just make the statement, and I'm not telling you why. I just tell you I believe it, and you are wrong for not believing that he's the best president we've ever had. Now, when I want to make that an argument, what I do is I give the reasons for which I think he's the best president we've ever had. Do you get the point? So it's not just making the claim and saying, this is what I believe. It's saying that I believe this because of the following reasons. You get the point? So that's what we want to do. That's basically the idea of an argument. An argument is not a fight. An argument is not a quarrel. In fact, sometimes we have arguments so that we do not have fights. Because you can say, Tinubu is the best. Then you say, no, Buhari is the best. Then I'll say, Tinubu is the best, Buhari is the best. And before you know, blood is flowing. So part of the reasons why we have arguments sometimes is so that the conversation will not devolve into a fight. So the moral argument for God's existence, that's basically what I want to talk about today. And I have 2 reasons, and both of those reasons follow. The first reason is important for understanding the second reason, and then we can draw a conclusion if the first reason and the second reason follow after one another necessarily. So the first statement, or the first premise, would be that if God did not exist, objective moral values and duties would not exist. If God did not exist, objective moral values and duties would not exist. So that's something you can write it down. So you can write it down and say the first premise 1, if God did not exist, or if God does not exist, objective moral values and duties would not exist. The second statement, which follows closely on the heels of the first statement, is that objective moral values and duties do exist. So if God does not exist, objective moral values and duties would not exist. But we know, or we will show, that objective moral values and duties do exist, and therefore we can make a conclusion to say it seems more likely than not, based on these 2 statements, that God exists. Do you get the point? Do you get the point? All right. So the first is, if God does not exist, objective moral values and duties would not exist. The second is, objective moral values and duties do exist, and then we can make a conclusion that says it is more reasonable than not, is more plausible than not, to think that on the strength of these 2 statements, God does exist. So we will need to show that the 2 statements are true. We will need to show that they are true. We will need to show that the 2 statements are being thought of properly, and then we can show that the conclusion necessarily follows from these 2 statements. So we'll deal with the first statement. If God does not exist, then objective moral values and duties would not exist. And in order to defend that claim, we need to talk about what objective moral values and duties are. What is an objective moral value? What is an objective moral duty? And what we are saying is that moral values and moral duties are not subjective. They are not grounded in personal preference. They are not grounded in what you like or what you do not like. By grounded, I mean when we say that something is wrong, we need to have an anchor that we use to hold on to what we know is right, and then we can say this is wrong. There's something that has to ground that statement. Do you get the point? So, for example, food, for instance, right? I don't like draw soup. I don't like draw soup. I would rather be hungry than eat draw soup. Do you get the point? I'm not saying that draw soup is the way you're looking at me. I'm not saying that draw soup is a problem. I'm talking about me. I'm talking about me, right? It is what I do not like. It's subjective. Yes, it is what I do not like. Do you understand the point? Right. Yet, that does not mean that draw soup is a bad soup. That's not a statement. That's not a statement about the objective reality of draw soup. Do you understand? Aha. The objective reality of draw soup is something that we can debate. We can ask ourselves if there is actually an objective reality of draw soup. In fact, not every draw soup draws. Right? So it's so you may not be able to say objectively this is what draw soup is. But subjectively, I don't like the taste of draw soup. Do you get the point? But there are things that we can say are objectively wrong. It doesn't depend on what you like. It doesn't depend on whether it makes you feel good or not. It is wrong to take another human's life if that human is innocent. It doesn't depend on if taking another innocent human life makes you feel good. It doesn't depend on that. It doesn't depend on whether it makes you have money. It's wrong to kidnap a human being. You can kidnap a human being and become very rich at it, right? Become very wealthy. You can even be doing giveaway on social media with your proceeds of kidnapping. But it doesn't change the fact that is wrong. So the question is, what is the thing that grounds kidnapping as wrong? Do you get the point? What is the thing that says that this is wrong? Because if it is about preference, there are people who would prefer kidnapping to another kind of job. I mean, it gives you very cool money. Well, maybe not cool, but it gives you a lot of money in a short period of time. Depending on your target, you can become very wealthy overnight. You can take someone and then in 72 hours you're a millionaire, right? So that's a lot of harvest for very little effort, in a short period of time. So someone can prefer it, but that doesn't make it right. Now, when we say that the only way to ground objective moral values and duties is in the existence of God, part of what we mean is that if God did not exist, it will not be wrong, for instance, to kidnap another human being. If God does not exist, why should someone not kidnap another person? Especially in this country where it seems like kidnappers... Anyway, you get the point. Yeah, you get the point. Yeah. So why would it be wrong? If God does not exist, the government is maybe not doing anything about it, right? You can, even if you were arrested, you can just say that you have repented, and you promise you will never do it again. You can. So for example, in this country, there are all sorts of reasons why it's very preferable. But the point is, what makes it wrong? Why should it not be done? And if God does not exist, then anything goes, really. If God does not exist, there is nothing that grounds right and wrong. There is nothing that grounds objective good from objective bad. There is no anchor that you can hold. There is no straight line that is the standard by which you measure everything else by. Do you get the point? Now, we're not saying that if you don't believe in God, you cannot do good, or you cannot do good, you cannot do the right thing. That's not what we're saying. What we are saying, what the premise is talking about, is that if God did not exist, there would be, properly speaking, no good for you to do. If we say, okay, why do you not kidnap people? You can say, well, if we kidnap people, it's not going to help the nation to move forward. And the question is, what makes the forward movement of the nation a good thing? Why is the societal peace? Why is that good? How can you say that the peace in society is a good thing? By what standard is the peace in society better than anarchy in the society? If you move it back a little, you're still going to come back to the issue. You don't escape the point. The point will still be there staring you in the face. And the question is, what makes this thing good and what makes this thing bad? If it is personal preference, whose personal preference makes this thing good and makes this thing bad? Do you see the issue? Talk to me. Do you see it? If you don't see it, it's okay. But so I know I should keep talking. But do you see it? Yeah. So the issue is, why can we say that this is right and this is wrong? It cannot be about what you like. It cannot be about what I like. Because, for instance, like I said, if we started debating the intrinsic value of soups, we would never leave this place. Because it's subjective. It's dependent on what I like. I can eat a plate of food and I would say it has a lot of pepper. It's very spicy. And then you can eat it, depending on where you've lived, and then you can say it's not spicy at all. You need more pepper. Do you get the point? So that's subjective. But what is objective is independent of what me and you think. You get the point? And we are saying that there has to be an independent of all of our biases, independent of all of our preferences, independent of all of what we can think, and it is grounded in something or someone that is transcendent. Someone that is bigger than all of us. Someone that is greater than all of us in the manner of speaking. Someone who our personal preferences would not affect what he is or who he is. And so that's what we mean when we say, if God does not exist, objective moral values and duties would not exist. Do you get the point? If God did not exist, then everything that Germany led by Hitler did was just ambition. You get the point? There's really nothing wrong about it. People were killing twins for so long in certain parts of this country. There's nothing wrong with that. You get the point? If you take God out of the picture, something happened a few weeks back, and I'm sure that some of you saw it, that there was this cultural thing in a particular village in this country, and it seemed like what was going on was that they were raping ladies. This is just a few months back. As part of the culture, it was part of the cultural thing, and any lady that was seen was assaulted and raped and all of that. Now, people began to complain and cry out and say, this is wrong, this is wrong. And as part of the conversations, I saw people who were atheists saying that this was wrong. And for the life of me, I couldn't understand it. How do you say that is wrong if you don't have a standard for right and wrong? And if you have a standard for right and wrong, what is that standard? Because if you think about it, the more people get raped, the more humans will populate the earth. At a certain pragmatic level, it makes sense. You say, okay, if you are weak, you should not procreate, so the stronger should dominate the weak. Right? Right? You people are too Christianized in your worldview. But you get, I'm making the kinds of arguments that you would need to make to someone who is not seen through your Christian worldview. So there were people who were making the argument and saying that this is wrong, this is bad, this should not be done, this should never happen. Why is this happening in the country? And they failed to see that on the worldview that they hold, they actually have no real reason why this should not be done. If someone has those kinds of carnal urges, why should he not satisfy his urges? Except you have a standard that says that the satisfaction of your urges in this way is actually wrong. Do you get the point? Aha. So that's the idea of the first statement, the first premise, that if God does not exist, moral values and duties, objective moral values and duties would not exist. Anybody can really do what they want. And you can't say that it is right. You can't say that it is wrong. It all boils down to a matter of personal preference. Do you get the point? Now, the second statement is that objective moral values and duties actually do exist. Now, just in case you are having a conversation with someone and the person is trying to say that there's no such thing as objective right and objective wrong, you can just slap the person. Don't do it, but depending on the person's size. You can slap the person. And the person is immediately going to understand that what you did was wrong. Right? And if the person asks you why it is wrong, you can slap the person again. Just to reinforce the idea that, you see, in my subjective world, slaps to innocent people is good. Slapping innocent people is nice. I really enjoy it. You should try it someday. All of a sudden, the person is going to realize that what you did was wrong. You know, sometimes it's even for instance, now you are in an event like this, and say you stand up and you go to use the restroom, and someone comes and sits on the seat where you were sitting. When you come back, you're going to look at the person and expect the person to move. Right? You'll be like, this is my seat. Now, you didn't buy it. You didn't pay for it. It doesn't have your name on it. The only claim you have to that seat is you were here first. And when the person says, I'm not going to move, because when I came, I didn't see your name on it. You say, why are you saying it's your seat? Did you buy it? You see, you are going to think that the person is being ridiculous. And you are not going to start explaining to the person why he's being ridiculous. You are going to appeal to something that is implied. There is something implied that we share as humans. There's a sense of a moral framework that every human, let me not say every human, but I can make the argument that every human shares it, right? That every human shares, or that most people share, or that is ingrained in our culture, and it sometimes, many times, is not even taught. The thing is just there. It's just there. It's just going to be like, this is where I was sitting before you got here. And the person is like, yes, is your name on it? You're like, no, I was sitting here. That's all that you say. What you are doing business with at that time is the implied framework that if I came here before you and I chose this seat before you and I stepped out briefly to do something and I come back, then I am entitled to that seat. Do you get the point? Aha. So there's a sense in which we expect the person to understand that there is something objective here. If I were in your shoes, I also wouldn't do this to you. Do you get the point? So I think that it is, in fact, I would think that most of the dissenters towards the claims in this argument would really want to speak to the first statement, to say that objective moral values and duties can be grounded without God. They can have an anchor without God. And I don't think that is possible, but those would be deeper conversations, right? But the idea is to introduce you to the subject, to tell you that, number one, it's very difficult, almost impossible, I would say, to ground objective moral values and duties without God, right? But secondly, to say that almost everybody has a sense of this understanding of objective moral values, that they exist, of objective moral values, of duties, that they exist. And because they are present, we can then draw a line from the fact that the only way to ground objective moral values and duties is in God, and we know that these objective moral values and duties exist. Therefore, we can make the conclusion to say that God exists. Do you get the point? You're not speaking to me. Do you get the point? If objective moral values and duties did not exist, then there would be no difference between someone like, say, Mother Teresa and Adolf Hitler. Right? This is not like the argument about Ronaldo and Messi. That's not what this is. Even though objectively. If you support Ronaldo, let me see your hand. You believe that Ronaldo is greater than Messi. You must be born again. So this is not that. You can banter, you can have those kind of conversations, and you can have them going on. They can keep going on. You can keep talking about it till kingdom come. Right? Are you here? But there are certain conversations, there are certain discussions that cannot be properly had by thinking people. If you say that there is really no difference, morally speaking, between Hitler and Mother Teresa, then something is seriously wrong. But if the person admits that there is a difference between the Boko Haram terrorists, right, and the doctors in the Red Cross, if the person admits that there is a difference, the person has to ground that difference somewhere. Do you get the point? And like I said, all of the examples or all of the alternatives that people give in order to ground values and duties, moral values and duties, all of those alternatives don't go far enough. You say, okay, we are doing it because it helps the society to be better. Why is the betterment of society a good thing? Do you get the point? You just shifted the claim backward a little bit. Do you get the point? Do you get the point? No, we know, if you do a little science, you know that at some point the universe is going to wind up, is going to come to an end. So if the universe is going to come to an end, why should it even get better at all? So saying that that's the reason why we hold moral values and duties. In fact, it can even be the reason why we hold moral values and duties, yet it lacks the explanatory power for the anchor of the moral values and duties. It is not strong enough to ground them, to hold them. It's not strong enough to be the objective reason why those things do exist. Do you get the point? Are you here? As you can see, it's a very simple argument, right? It's very simple, it's very straightforward, but it makes the point. There's a book that C.S. Lewis wrote, The Abolition of Man. And in that book, one of the indexes, what he does is that he collates a sample of different kinds of civilizations. So he looks into the Egyptian civilization, ancient Egyptian, ancient Babylonian civilization. He looks into the Jewish civilization. He looks into the Norse civilization. He looks into different civilizations that could not have, permit me to use the word, could not have fellowship with one another. There was no relationship. There was no spread. It wasn't possible for there to be spread between these civilizations. Yet, you find that the moral values in these different civilizations are very similar. So, you look at the ancient Egyptian civilization, you look at the ancient Indian civilization, and you see a similarity of moral values. Do you get the point? You look at the Babylonian civilization, and this was not in the days where they had the internet, or they had WhatsApp, or they had all of that. So it was difficult or near impossible for there to be spread of ideas and ideologies between these civilizations, yet you see that these different civilizations have similar traits, similar understandings of moral values and duties. Do you get the point? And people say that sometimes even among thieves there's honor. Have you seen a movie where a band of thieves went to steal money from, say, a bank, right? And they stole the money successfully. Then one of the thieves decided that all the thieves should not have the money. So that one thief decided to loot the loot. Right? Say, Everybody in APC should not. Oh, sorry. Everybody in this band of thieves should not have the money. So I want to be the only person to have the money. So this person goes and steals the money or tries to steal the money from every other person. And then sometimes, depending, there are a number of movies that have these kinds of things. And sometimes the person succeeds. Then the other thieves are now offended. They now even say they are going to kill that person. And it doesn't make any sense at all. The money was... It was stolen in the first place. And when you stole the money, you didn't think about how the people you stole it from would feel. But now, because someone stole that money from you, you now feel that the person did you wrong. The idea is that everybody has a sense of objective morality. And if you follow the trail long enough, it will bring you back to God. Thank you so much.